Hello students, I am Anshul Khanna teaching at Sri Chaitanya Goshala, Vijayawada. Today we will be doing the chapter of some mechanical property of fluid. This chapter has been divided into three parts. The first part static, second part dynamic and the third part surface tension. So without wasting time, let's start discussing it. Fluid statics. A fluid is said to be in static condition when it is at rest with respect to the beaker container which is holding it. Let's talk about the first important term, density. Density is simply defined as mass upon volume. Density of pure water is 1000 kg per meter cube. What is 1 meter cube? 1 meter cube is the volume of a cube having side length of 1 meter. So 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. So visualize a cube of volume 1 meter cube. In this cube of volume 1 meter cube, you can pour in 1000 kg of water. The regular water bottle that we buy of Kinley or Aquafina, that 1 liter bottle weighs 1 kg. So inside this tank of volume 1 meter cube, you can pour in such 1000 bottles of water. Now next term, density of pure water must be known by you. It is not mentioned in the question paper. So you must know density of pure water is 1000 kg per meter cube. Relative density, which is also known as specific gravity. Relative density is defined as the density of the substance upon the density of water at 4 degrees centigrade. For example, relative density of mercury comes out to be 13.6. If the relative density of mercury is 13.6, it means that the density of mercury is 13.6 times the density of water. Let's do two simple examples. First one, equal volume of two fluids of density ρ1 and ρ2 are mixed. What is the density of mixture? So here you take two substances, one of density ρ1, another of density ρ2, you mix them, but mix them in equal volume. So what is the density of mixture? So let's say you take volume V of both. Okay. First one having density ρ1, second having density ρ2. The mass of first one you are adding is ρ1V. The mass of second one you are adding is ρ2V. Once you have mixed them, the final volume you will have 2V. And the overall mass you will have is ρ1V plus ρ2V, the mass of first one plus the mass of second one. So you will say the density equivalent, the equivalent density of this mixture comes out to be overall mass, that is ρ1V plus ρ2V upon overall volume, that is 2V. So your answer simply comes out to be ρ1 plus ρ2 by 2. Same type of question but little bit of different. If equal masses of two fluids of density ρ1 and ρ2 are mixed, determine the density of mixture. This time we are taking equal masses. So let's say the first one has mass m, the second one has mass m. The first one has density ρ1, the second one has density ρ2. If the first one has mass m and density ρ1, then you can say the volume of first one will be m by ρ1. Similarly, if second one has mass m and density ρ2, you can say the volume of second one has to be equal to m by ρ2. When you add them up, the overall mass becomes 2m and the overall volume becomes equals to V1 plus V2. So you can say the density equivalent of this whole system is 2m upon the volume equivalent, which is V1 plus V2, which is nothing but m by ρ1 plus m by ρ2. You can cancel out m, and then on solving you will get 2 ρ1 ρ2 upon ρ1 plus ρ2. You ask anyone what is pressure, they simply say pressure is force upon area, which is a totally incorrect definition because force is a vector quantity as well as area is a vector quantity. Vector division is not at all allowed. So you can't say pressure equals to force by area because vector division is not at all allowed. So what is the actual definition? Let's say you have got a balloon filled with air inside. Because of the air inside, there will be some force on the surface. Let's say the pressure at this point in the air is P. And consider an infinitely small area on the surface of balloon. Let's mark this infinitely small area as dA. The direction of infinitely small area vector has to be normal to the area. So it has to be perpendicular to the local surface plane. So now here, how do we write pressure as? We say that the infinitely small force acting on this infinitely small area because of the air filled inside, the infinitely small force acting dF equals to pressure times dA. You can't write pressure equals to dF by dA. Again, I am saying that because vector division is not at all allowed. So next thing, how is the variation of pressure with depth? Let's say we have got this tank filled with a fluid of density rho. Atmospheric pressure is P atm. You need to write what is the pressure at a depth h. So we say that the pressure at this point x, which is at a depth h, is equals to the pressure at the surface P atm plus density of fluid multiplied by g multiplied by height you have gone below the surface. So let's do two simple questions. The first one, density of water is 1000 kg per meter cube. How much length of water column exerts a pressure of 1 atm? So we know that the pressure exerted by a liquid column of height h equals to rho g h. Now here we want the water to exert a pressure of 1 atm, which is 10 raised to the power of 5 Pascal. So we can write 10 raised to the power of 5 equals to rho g h. Now the density of water has to be 1000 kg per meter cube. So that becomes 1000 into g, that is 10 multiplied by height. So here you will get the height of liquid column has to equal to 10 raised to the power of 5 by 10 raised to the power of 4, and 10 raised to the power of 5 by 10 raised to the power of 4 is simply 10 meter. This means that 10 meter height of water column exerts a pressure of 1 atm, which is equal to atmospheric pressure. Next question, determine the pressure at the depth of 10 meter, 20 meter, 25 meter below the surface of water. So now let's say we have got this tank which has got depth more than 25 meter. Let's say this is the surface of water. They are asking what is the pressure at a depth of 10 meter, let's say at point x, at a depth of 20 meter, let's say point y, and at a depth of 25 meter, let's say point z. At point x, there will be pressure because of the fluid above it, 10 meter of water above it, as well as atmospheric pressure. Because of atmospheric pressure at point x, the pressure will be 1 atm. Because of 10 meter of water column, again at point x, the pressure will be 1 more atm. So the net pressure at point x has to be 2 atm, which is nothing but 2 into 10 to the power of 5 Pascal. Similarly, at point y, because of the 20 meter of water above it, pressure will be 2 atm. And because of atmosphere, the pressure has to be 1 more atm. So the pressure at point y comes out to be 3 atm. Similarly, at point z, at this point z, because of the 25 meter of water here, the pressure will be 2.5 atm, and because of atmospheric 1 atm, so the net pressure at point z comes out to be 3.5 atm. Let's say we have a tank with two fluids of density rho 1 and rho 2, and the atmospheric pressure is Ptm. They are asking me what is the pressure at point x. First thing, if this fluid is above the second fluid, this means that the density of first fluid has to be lesser. What is the pressure at point x? Very simple, the pressure at point x has to be P atm plus rho 1 GH1 plus rho 2 GH2. Now let's talk about a device called barometer. Torricelli discovered barometer to calculate the atmospheric pressure. The construction is very simple. He took a tub, filled it with mercury, then he took a glass tube closed at one end, and he started pouring mercury into this tube. Once the tube was completely filled, he closed the top of tube with his thumb, then he inverted the tube and placed it inside tub and removed his thumb. On removing thumb, he found that some part of mercury comes out, but some part stays inside the tube. Now the question is, why this some part stays? Because of the difference in pressure at the top of the tube and the atmospheric pressure. Then he wrote the equation that the pressure atmospheric at this point is nothing but equal to pressure inside at the top of the tube plus rho gh. In an ideal barometer, the pressure inside should be 0, but we know that there is no such condition of ideality. That's why we must consider some pressure inside. So P atm atmospheric pressure at this point equals to P inside plus rho g. Now let's talk about manometer. Manometer is a device used to measure the pressure of gas inside a tank. Manometer is a very simple thing. You take a U tube, on two sides you have got mercury filled. Since on both sides are exposed to atmosphere, the level of mercury on both the sides is same. Now if I wish to measure the pressure of the gas inside this tank, I connect the manometer with this tank and then open up this valve. Because of the air inside, if it is at high pressure, it pushes the mercury down. So the mercury on the right limb will rise up. Let's say when it attains equilibrium, the difference in the height of mercury in the two limbs is h. So we can say here pressure is P atm. So here pressure will be P atm plus density of mercury into G into H. And here on the surface of mercury on the other side, the pressure has to be equal to pressure of gas. So pressure of gas equals to P atm plus rho gh. Here we define one more quantity called gauge pressure. Gauge pressure is nothing but pressure of gas minus PATM. Gauge pressure is nothing but pressure of gas minus PATM, and this comes out to equal to rho GH. Gauge pressure means the measuring instrument, screw gauge, okay, the measuring instrument. Gauge pressure is nothing but the reading shown by the measuring instrument. A measuring instrument do not tell you the exact pressure of the gas inside. It tells you the pressure difference between the gas and external. If you get the height of mercury here as H, you will say that the reading of the gauge is H, which corresponds to a pressure of rho GH, and the pressure of rho GH is the difference in the pressure of gas and atmosphere. Pressure is a scalar quantity. Now Pascal's law tells us two things. First thing, pressure at a point is same in all direction. If we have got little bit of gas trapped here and we place any surface in any direction around it, whether this way or this way or this way, the same gas will exert equal pressure in all directions. Pressure at a point is same in all directions. This is the first part. The second part, in a closed container, if the pressure at a point is changed by a certain amount, then the pressure at all point changes by the same amount. Let's take an example. Let's say we have a container completely filled with a fluid of density rho. There is no air inside this tank. It is completely airtight. If somebody asks you what is the pressure at point 1, since there is no air, there is no atmospheric pressure, here you will say at the top the pressure will be 0. At the lowest most point, the pressure has to be equals to rho GH. Now you remove this cork. When this cork has been removed, the pressure at this point now will be equal to PATM. Since this is one continuously closed fluid, if the pressure at one point increases from 0 to PATM, then the pressure at all points inside fluid will increase by the same magnitude from 0 to PATM. So the pressure at lowest point will also become rho GH plus PATM. So question, we have a U-tube filled with a fluid of density rho. If H length of fluid of density rho by 2 is poured in the left arm, find the increase in the fluid height in the right arm. If you have got this U-tube containing fluid of density rho, in the left arm you pour a H height of fluid of density rho by 2, then what will be the rise in the height of fluid in the right arm? Let's say the fluid in the right arm rises by height x, so the fluid in the left arm will drop down by height x, and let's say on the top of it you have got another fluid of height h having a density rho by 2. So our mission is to find this x. Now it's very easy. Within one continuous fluid which do not have any horizontal acceleration, the pressure at same point inside the fluid is same. So what you can do here is, you can say this height is 2x, this height is h, you can write PATM plus rho by 2 into g into h equals to PATM plus rho g into 2x. So here PATM get cancelled, rho and rho get cancelled, g and g get cancelled, so you get x equals to h by 4. So in the right limb, the fluid rises by a height h by 4. Variation of pressure due to acceleration. Let's say there is a cylinder completely filled with a fluid and the cylinder accelerates towards right. If the cylinder accelerates towards right, the simple question which I wanted to ask, where the pressure will be more, Px will be more or Py will be more? The pressure at point x will be higher or the pressure at point y will be higher? It is very easy to answer. Let's see how. If the whole tank accelerates towards right, then each and every water molecule accelerates towards right. If each and every water molecule accelerates towards right, this means that each and every water molecule should have a net force towards right. Looking at a macroscopic scale, let's cut down this much part and think of only this much of cylinder having a length L, and since they haven't mentioned the cross-sectional area, let's assume the cross-sectional area to be A. Because of the fluid to the left of this part, let's say here the pressure is Py, so the force acting will be Py into A, and because of the fluid on the right of this part, let's say at this point pressure is Px. So because of the fluid on the right, there will be a force Px into it. Since on this particular fluid element on the macroscopic scale has a net acceleration towards right, that's why on this fluid element there should be a net force towards right, and for a net force to be towards right, Pya should be greater than Pxa. So net force towards right can be written as Pya minus Pxa. This is the net force towards right. This has to be equal to mass times acceleration. Now if this length is L, cross sectional area is A, so the volume of this fluid will be La. Density is rho, so the mass becomes rho La into A. So this particular equation is nothing but the net force equals to mass into acceleration. So Pya minus Pxa, net force equals to mass rho into La, density into volume into acceleration. So dividing by A, you get Py minus Px equals to rho Al, or the pressure difference created because of acceleration equals to rho Al. Notice that here the pressure at point Y is more than the pressure at point X. So now two more simple questions. First one, let's say we have this container containing some fluid. There is an air bubble inside the fluid as well as a steel ball. If the container starts accelerating towards right, in which direction will the air bubble move? In which direction will the steel ball move? This question is very, very easy. Rather than visualizing this, visualize that you have a tank, okay, filled up with water, okay. You release inside it two things, an air bubble and a steel ball. Where does the air bubble move? All of us know it moves upward and the steel ball moves downward. So remember that the lighter thing has got tendency to move from high pressure region to low pressure region, while the heavier thing has got tendency to move from low pressure region into higher pressure region. So when we accelerate this whole thing towards right, where the pressure will be high, at point 1 or at point 2? Yes, we have just done it. Since the whole fluid accelerates towards right, there has to be a net force towards right, and for net force to be towards right, the pressure at point 2 has to be more than pressure at point 1. Since the pressure at point 2 is more, air bubble moves from high pressure region to low pressure region, that is in direction of acceleration, while the steel ball moves from low pressure region to high pressure region, that is in direction opposite to acceleration. So next question, there is a tank filled up with fluid. The tank is not at all accelerating, that's why the surface of fluid is horizontal. Now the tank is given a horizontal acceleration A towards right. Because of this particular acceleration, the surface of fluid tilts and makes some angle theta with the horizontal. Our mission is to find this angle theta. How to find it? A little bit of construction. Think of a random point x here. Let's say this point is h below the surface and at distance L from this first point. Since the upper surface is exposed to atmosphere, at pressure at all points here on surface will be P atm. We can write the pressure of this point x as, if we move downward, the pressure increases because of gravity. So pressure at point x can be written as P atm plus rho gh. Similarly, the pressure at point x can also be written starting from this point. If I go from this frontmost point to this point, the pressure increases because of acceleration, and this pressure will be P atm plus rho al. Now on both the side you can cancel out P atm. On both the side then you can cancel out rho. So you get gh equals to al, or you can say h by l equals to a by g equals to tan theta. So you can find this angle theta as tan inverse a by g. So let's see this example. There is a tube of base length L. Initially fluid filled to equal height in both arms. If the tube now suddenly starts accelerating with an acceleration a towards right, the first part, in which limb the fluid will rise and by how much? So first thing first, just tell me out of these 2 point 1 and 2, at which point the pressure has to be higher? Yes, you are right, the pressure at point 1 has to be higher. Since the pressure at point 1 has to be higher than at point 2, as we go vertically down, the pressure increases because of gravity and height. So in this arm, since the pressure at point 1 finally has to be higher, in this arm the length of the fluid has to be higher. Now let's say the red line represents the original equal level of the fluid height. As the tube accelerates with an acceleration a towards right, let's say in the left arm the liquid level rises by distance x, so in the right arm it has to fall by distance x. So now the difference in the height of fluid in the two arms will be 2x. But how to find this x? So it's pretty easy. You have to write equation Which equation? Pressure equation. Either you can do one thing, think of this height, this remaining height of fluid as small h. You can move from atmosphere till point 1 and from here atmosphere till point 1 and equate the pressure. You can write equation like P ATM plus rho g into 2x, x plus x, 2x plus rho g into h equals to P ATM plus rho gh plus rho al, because on going from 2 to 1 the pressure increases. Or you can equate the pressure at point 2. You can write P ATM plus rho g into 2x plus rho gh minus rho al, because you are going from high pressure to lower pressure, minus rho al equals to P ATM plus rho gh. Or you can enter from here and then exit from there. You can write P ATM plus rho g 2x plus rho gh minus rho al minus rho gh equals to P ATM. So I am using this last equation, entering and exiting. I will write P ATM plus rho g 2x plus rho g h minus, because I am moving from higher pressure to lower, minus rho al minus rho gh equals to P ATM. Now you can see on both the sides I can cancel off P ATM. This term of rho gh get cancelled on its own. So I get rho g into 2x equals to rho al, cancel out rho, and then you get x to be equal to simply al by 2g. Next thing, pressure variation in a tube because of rotation. First thing first, again I will ask, now think in this tube 2 points A and B. At which point the pressure has to be higher? Since the tube rotates, the fluid inside the tube also rotates. Since the fluid inside tube rotates, every small part moves in a circle. For a particle to move in a circle, a net force is required towards the center. That particular force is called centripetal force. So now here, at which point the pressure has to be higher, at A or at B? If you visualize only this much of cross-sectional part between A and B. Let's say pressure at A is PA. So here the force will be PA into A, and here the force will be PB into A. You require on this much part a net force towards the center. That's why pressure at B has to be more than pressure at A, so that you get a net force towards the center. The net force acting towards the center has to be centripetal force. But here we are trying to find something else. We are trying to find what is the pressure at distance r, taking the pressure on the axis as 0. So if we wish to find pressure up to distance r, only consider this much section. If the pressure at the axis is 0, there will be no force from the axis. If I take the pressure at distance r to be P and the cross-sectional area of this tube as A, then the force applied by the fluid on the right of it will be P into A. The net force acting towards the center PA has to be equal to centripetal force, that is m omega square r. The mass of the fluid trapped in this much length will be density into volume AR, m omega square r. R is the radius in which the center of mass of the system rotates. So if this section has got length r, then the center of mass rotates in a circle of radius r by 2. So m omega square r. You can multiply this r with that r and cancel out a and a. You get that pressure at distance r equals to rho omega square r square by 2. So next, equation of vortex. Let's say there is a container filled up with a fluid and then it is turned. If you turn the container, you notice that the surface do not remain straight anymore and it becomes a curved surface. So what is the equation of this surface? That is what we are going to find out, and it's a very simple article. Let's say this is the shape of the surface and this is some random point on this curve. We denote this point with the coordinate x comma y, taking the lowest point here as the origin. If the whole tumbler rotates with an angular velocity omega, the coordinates of this point is x comma y. So this distance has to be x and this distance has to be y. The whole surface is exposed to atmosphere. So at all points on surface, pressure has to be P ATM. Now you can reach this point starting from origin and moving horizontally. But moving horizontally, the pressure will increase because of rotation. So if here at 0, 0, the pressure is P ATM, at this point pressure will be P ATM plus rho omega square x square by 2. Moving from surface downwards by distance y, the pressure here will increase because of gravity, and the pressure at same point can be written as P ATM plus rho gy. Cancel out P ATM, then cancel out rho, so you get omega square x square by 2 equals to gy. So you can rewrite y equals to omega square x square by 2g, which is nothing but the equation of a parabola. Okay, so this is equation of parabola, not at all a tough thing to find. So now the next heading we need to talk about is hydraulic lift. Hydraulic lift are also simple thing. In hydraulic lift, you have got two tubes connected, one with larger cross sectional area, one with smaller cross sectional area. It is again an example of lifting a heavier object by applying a smaller force. If you place a mass m here, and let's say the cross sectional area of this piston is capital A, and you apply a force F here, and let's say the cross sectional area of this piston is small a. If the system is in equilibrium, then the pressure at both the points has to be same. So here the pressure will be equal to F by A, and here the pressure has to be equal to force mg by A. So the force that has to be applied equals to mg into small a by capital A. Now for the sake of understanding, let's say this smaller area is 1/10 of the bigger area. If the smaller area is 1/10 of the bigger area, how much force has to be applied to support the weight? So here substitute a by 10, you get the force applied has to be mg by 10. This means that you have to apply 1/10 force to support the weight of this body of mass m. If this area will be 1/5, then you will have to apply 1/5 force. If this area will be 100 times smaller, then you have to apply 100 times smaller force. Okay. Now next thing here, there is something called mechanical advantage. Mechanical advantages are not well defined term, but it goes like mechanical advantage is load upon effort. That how much load you can support by applying how much of force, load upon effort. So load here we are balancing is mg, effort we are applying is F. So load upon effort is equals to the area of bigger tube upon area of smaller tube. That is called a mechanical advantage. If the area of bigger tube is 1000 times the area of smaller tube, then the mechanical advantage will be 1000. Archimedes principle. If a body is partially or fully submerged inside a fluid, then the upthrust force acting on the body is equal to the weight of the fluid displaced, Let us consider two cases. Case 1, when a body floats on a fluid. If a body floats on the fluid, then the density of the body has to be less than the density of the fluid. If the body floats, this means that it is in equilibrium. This means that the force of gravity mg downwards is compensated by the force of buoyancy acting upward. So if the body floats, then the force of buoyancy has to be equal to force of gravity. The force of buoyancy can be written as the weight of the fluid displaced. How much fluid does it displace? The volume of fluid it displaces Vs, but that is not at all buoyancy force. Buoyancy force is the weight of the fluid displaced. If the volume of fluid displaces Vs, what is the mass of fluid displaced? The mass of fluid displaced is density of fluid into Vs. So this quantity right here represents volume of fluid displaced. Rho F into Vs represents the mass of fluid displaced into G. This represents the weight of the fluid displaced. So the force of buoyancy is equal to the weight of the fluid displaced, that is mass of the fluid displaced multiplied by G. So the upward force of buoyancy, density of surrounding fluid into volume submerged into G, for a floating body must be equal to the weight of the body, and the weight of the body can be written as density of the body into volume of the body into G. Here you can cancel out Gg, and you can write volume submerged upon volume of the body equals to density of body upon density of surrounding fluid. So you can say the fraction of volume submerged out of the overall volume, the volume that has been submerged, the fraction of volume submerged equals to density of body upon density of surrounding fluid. If let's say surrounding fluid has got density of 1000 and this block has got density of 500, so if the density is half, then half of the volume will be submerged. If let's say density is 1/3, then 1/3 will be submerged, 2/3 will be floating. If the density is 1/10, let's say 100 kg per meter cube, then 1/10 will be submerged and 9/10 will be floating. Think the case of water and ice. In case of water and ice, the density of ice is 900 kg per meter cube, while the density of water is 1000 kg per meter cube. Since the density of ice is 9/10 of the ice is immersed while 1/10 is outside. So there is this famous saying that tip of the iceberg. Because the density of ice is 9/10 of that of water. So if the whole ice has got volume V, then 9V by 10 is inside and only V by 10 is outside. Okay, next thing. For body completely submerged, completely inside the fluid. If the body is completely inside fluid, then there will be two forces acting on it. A force of gravity, which will be nothing but mass of the body, density of body into volume of body into g, as well as a force of buoyancy. And the force of buoyancy will be density of surrounding fluid into volume into g. So the net force downward will be equal to weight of the body minus force of buoyancy, that is density of body into volume into g minus density of surrounding fluid into volume into g. From these two, take forcefully density of body into volume into g common. If you take this common, the second term does not have density of body. So in denominator, in second term, you will get rho v. Density of body into volume into g is nothing but weight of the body. So we say when placed inside a fluid, the effective weight, the effective downward force, weight equivalent comes out to be actual weight into 1 minus density of surrounding fluid upon the density of body. So we are ending this session on fluid statics with the last two examples. Let's say we have got two fluids in a tank having density rho 1, rho and rho 2. Now, as you can see, this body is between the two fluids, lower fluid and upper fluid. This means that the density of the body has to be less than the density of lower fluid, but it has to be higher than the density of upper fluid. The question that gets asked is, what is the ratio of the volume of fluid submerged in two liquids? If the volume of fluid in upper liquid is V1 and lower is V2, then what is V1 by V2? Actually, this is not the appropriate method to solve the question, but okay, it helps. It's an easy solution, so let's do it. The buoyant force by upper fluid on this body has to be equal to density of surrounding fluid into volume submerged into g. The buoyant force by lower fluid has to be equal to density of surrounding fluid into volume submerged into g. And the sum of these two buoyant force has to be equal to weight of the body, that is density of the body into V1 plus V2 into g. Solving this equation, you can find out V1 by V2, that is the ratio of volume submerged in the two bodies. Next question. There is a wooden block placed on water and there is a coin at the top. If the coin falls into the tank, what happens to length L, what happens to length H? It's very obvious. When the coin falls, the volume of wooden block submerged will decrease, so the block will rise up. So the first part is very easy, L decreases. But the second part is not very intuitive. People think that when the coin will fall, the level of liquid will rise and the H will increase. No, that is not at all right. The actual answer is that height also decreases. Now, why the height decreases? To answer this, I ask students an entirely different question. Let's forget that coin is moving from top of wooden block into water. Forget this thing. Think that you have got two tanks filled with water. Identical tanks, both have the same wooden block here. And let's say somebody puts a coin from outside. Case 1, somebody puts the coin directly into water. Case 2, somebody puts the coin over the block, and because of block, the coin floats. Question is, if on putting coin directly into water, the rise in the height of liquid is H1, and if on placing the coin on top of this wooden block, the height of the rise in the fluid is H2, which one has to be more, H1 or H2? Think over it. Now, the correct answer is H2 has to be more than H1. Why H2 has to be more than H1? Reason being, when you place the coin directly into water, the coin sinks. Because the coin sinks, it means that the force of buoyancy is less than the weight of the coin. If the force of buoyancy is less than the weight of the coin, it means that the weight of the fluid displaced is less than the weight of the coin. In this case, when you place the coin over the block, the coin do not sink. Why? Because the coin pushes the block down. The excess buoyant force acting on this block after placement of coin equals to the weight of the coin. So in the first case, the excess buoyant force is less than the weight of the coin. In second case, the excess buoyant force is equal to the weight of the coin. So in which case water displaced has to be more. Since the buoyant force in second case is more, the water displaced in second case is more. So the height of the fluid rising in second case is more. So H2 has to be greater than H1. They don't ask you this question directly, but they ask you what happens if coin falls from here to here. So if in these two containers from outside the coin comes here, it sinks, here it flows, so the rise in liquid height here is more. If the coin falls from top of the wooden block into water, then the height of the water level in the tank will fall. Thank you.